Hi there, this is Ishii and welcome back to my channel. So I've been a little bit slow on this next upload, but I have been super busy this summer, so I'm just getting around to doing a couple of videos over the next 2 weeks now. And I know I was going to do another video in my Source Direct Breakdown series, but I kind of lost a little bit of momentum with that, so I'm jumping into something new today, which is going to be this breakdown of one of my favourite tunes, which is a Shogun remix of this Ken Ishii track called Stretch. Now, Shogun is the alias of this guy called Oliver Lomax, who also made tunes under the name of Artemis. And he has some incredible DnB tunes like pre-2000s. There's some epic tunes like Elysian Fields and a few others I've always loved, but never really put two and two together. So anyway, this guy has got some amazing music, and what I've got today is a complete breakdown of one of his tracks. I've actually just transcribed it pretty much note for note, so I can show you exactly what is going on in this tune. Okay, so we're in Logic now, and I think a really good place to start here would just be to show you a comparison of the original track and then to show you how close I got with my remake. Okay, wicked. So I got pretty close there, and I'm really happy with my remake. I put a lot of effort into recreating lots of the effects and to get my drums to sound as similar as I could. And there's a lot in here for me to show you. So I think it's going to be a really insightful walkthrough, and I'm really excited to take you through it now. So I think the probably most logical place to start would be to dive into all the drums here. What I can hear really clearly there, and what I picked out, was there's like a tambourine element like playing in the high pitched area, and then there is this sort of shuffly thing which is happening around the kick and the snare and really filling in a lot of the kind of upper mid space. And then there's quite an obvious kick and snare which sound like they're from a different break, or they're one shot hits or something like that. And maybe a better place to show is actually down here. You can hear kind of the raw break a little bit better with just the bass. So you've got the kind of tambourine element, and then the shakery thing that's doing a lot of the work there, and then just this simple repeating pattern. So for my one, I actually got this Headhunters God Made Me Funky was where I started with this, just with this kick and snare stuff here. And I think I've combined it with this. Because actually there's even in the kick and snare, what's happening, I can hear there's like 2 kicks with more low end in them and then 2 a little bit lighter. So it's like a doo-doo and then a that's what's happening with the kick there. So if I try to emulate this by moving a kick to a new track and then just pulling the EQ up a little bit to cut more of the lows off. So we're already getting a bit of rhythm just in the way the kicks are happening there. You're creating rhythm rather than just having everything static. He's doing loads of clever things in his track to keep things interesting. And then I've also come and I've layered, which is a bit more of a high pitch kind of clicky sound, a bit of a brighter sound over the little bit more kind of muffled God Made Me Funky breaking together. The next most important thing I've done is layering some amens in here, and this is a really good way to just give your breaks energy. And this style is really about having this rolling groove, but it needs to have energy in there, and so layering some amen breaks in is a really good thing to do. And I've actually got 2 different amens in here, so I've really compressed it and EQ'd it. And I'm also copying the same pattern from my kick and snare. And as I'm building this stuff, I'm always matching these rhythms to make sure everything's aligning, and also like aligning the transients quite a lot and just checking that things are sounding good as I'm going. So I can kind of show you this as we go through it. But so this one's a bit more mid-rangey, and this one is a bit more splashy. But they're sounding quite tight together, and I've made sure the patterns are exactly the same for these 2 amens as my kick and snare pattern. You can hear there's one thing I'm doing is I'm actually using shuffles here. Instead of doing this exactly the same pattern, I'm doing this little shuffle bit here. Just because I wanted to add a little bit of groove in there as well. I tried it with just copying the kicks and it worked better this way. So you can obviously deviate a little bit, but it's really about making things sound cohesive. It's about kind of copying these elements down and not just having everything too random. So the next thing I did was layer a whole bunch more drum breaks in here, all following this same pattern as the kick and snare. So it's definitely about layering and about thickening out kind of the sound and the frequency spectrum, but it's not always about having too many conflicting rhythms and things like that going on. You want to thicken up the sound, but not just confuse it and make it too complex. And I'm really controlling the frequency spectrum for all these breaks. EQ is the thing I'm using the most here, often pulling away low end and sometimes even just like dampening the highs down a little bit. Simple EQ moves, I'm not really worrying about resonances and things like that. I'm just doing like shells and cuts and things like that mainly. And then the next thing I did is I really tried to copy that mid-rangey, you can hear it here much better if I jump to this part of the track again. There's this kind of, it's like a shaker, but it's got way more mid-range in, and it's really hard to pick what actually instrument is playing. But what it is doing is carrying a lot of the groove. And the way I actually got this into my track, it sounds like this, which sounds really rubbish on its own. So it sounds a little bit mental, but when I feed this track into everything else, you can hear it just starts to really thicken up and make everything sound a lot more busy. And it's just playing, I think it's like a 16th note groove here. And the way I created this was I bounced down all of these drum breaks. I actually did it for this section here. If I come over here, I just selected this whole lot and just bounced it down to a new track. And then I fed this into Shaper Box and just mess with like some of these filter shapes and the time things. This might have even just been I used this chopper preset is what I did, and it just gave me this kind of weird result here. So there's all this weird stuff going on, but I thought there's some good stuff in there, so I then bounced this down again from with this Shaper Box stuff printed on it. And then if I turn this back off, and then I came in here and I just started to edit with this, and I just heard like, I think I heard this cool little rhythm here. So that's kind of cool. Maybe I duplicate it like this. Something like this started to happen, and I was just messing around trying to get this to kind of groove the way I wanted it, and just duplicating it around, maybe something like this. And just ended up with a cool little repeating pattern that just had a little bit more in it than like one note at the same velocity playing the same instrument. You know, I was trying to create a little bit more of an interesting groove. So as well as this kind of shuffly idea that's given me a lot of energy, I've done a few things just to fill out the sound even more. And I've got this tambourine here, and then I've layered this with another tambourine. Just to give me some more cool like rhythms going on there. And similar here, I've got another tambourine maybe. But I think when you look at this, all of these things as a whole, there's a few things that are going on which you can use maybe as the foundations when you're trying to do this type of layering. And one thing is to do these pulse elements. So like this shaker here, which is like a 16th note shaker, as well as this tambourine. And this one as well. So they're just hitting dead on the grid. So you've got these kind of dead on the grid things, but then you also need to add the little bits of rhythm and kind of stuff in between just to help things groove a little bit more. If everything's just hitting on that pulse, it just sounds really kind of lame and boring. Kind of offbeat notes are, but if you look, I'm not going off the actual kind of grid of 16th notes, so everything is not being swung really at all. It's just these little kind of offbeats is what I'm actually focusing on, and little bits of syncopation that help bring everything to life. And then the other thing I'm doing is just layering loads of things like breaks like this that already have lots of those little kind of things going on in them over the top, and then you don't have to do so much work yourself. A lot of the stuff is just happening in the breaks. The next thing to talk about with these breaks is the few little things he's doing with regards to kind of the programming to keep things interesting. And there's just a few variations happening every now and again. And the first thing he's doing is just using kind of mutes, or just pulling some of the elements out just at the kind of end of every kind of 4 bars here. Just pulling the kick and snare out of these parts. So I've just used track mutes here to do it in my version. And then at this main kind of area here, so this is, it kind of builds and builds and builds for ages and ages, and then we get to this drop section where the bass comes in. Oh, it's such a good tune. And anyway, so he comes and there's just a little bit of kind of a drum fill leading up to this drop section. Just tiny things, you know, for all of this, it's just this repeating drum groove with nothing else happening, everything's just looping up. And then the last thing he does is these little double snares at the end of the bar. So some pulling out some elements, some little double hits, and then little fills as well. Nothing too crazy, you know, there's no big rolls or anything like that we hear in drum and bass these days. It's all about these subtle little elements to keep the groove happening. Now regarding the arrangement of the drums, it's pretty simple. I showed you those three little kind of techniques he's using to create interest as this rolling grooves happening. And then every now and again, he's just pulling out certain elements. He has this section here where it drops into more of a stripped back section. And then there's another part where the ride comes in. So he is adding and taking away drum elements in a very standard kind of way to bring energy into new sections of the track. One other quite interesting thing I want to show you here is how he's done this ride element. Now, if we listen to maybe his original track first. It's got this really kind of rolling, grooving ride, and what he's actually doing is not a very conventional technique. Quite often you see rides maybe on a quarter note or an eighth note playing on the pulse, but he's done something a lot more rhythmical here. So that's the pattern he's gone for. And I think one thing that is also probably worth showing you here is that sometimes you just got to throw paint at the wall until something sticks. And I tried this ride element first, and I think that wasn't working for whatever reason. And then I tried this one, which was super aggressive, and then this one here. And none of them were quite right, and eventually I chucked one into a sampler because I actually wanted to control the decay of the hit with an ADSR in this sampler and also pitch it up. So and eventually I got a ride that worked way better with my tracks. So it's always about trial and error, this stuff, just to get something that sounds good. It always takes a bit of time. And that was really it for the arrangement. It's pretty, if you look at this, it's just a lot of these repeating patterns. Like everything I've really just duplicated across most of the time. And so once you've got that foundation, that core groove you've got, you don't have to do too much more else with the drums apart from pull stuff away at certain times and maybe introduce other things back in. So it's very simple once you get the basic groove down. Finally, just regarding the processing, there was a few things I did here. And the first thing I've done is got my kick and snare on one bus. And then I've got all my other layers on another bus, and then they're both going to my main drum bus. So I've split those things up just so I can balance them separately against each other. And then I don't want to go through everything on this drum bus, but you can see I'm using lots of EQ. I actually did quite a big pull of just this mid area as well, just to give all the other elements in the track a little bit more space. It just was, if you listen to his drums, they're nice and clean and bright, and mine were just a little bit too heavy in this mid region. And then I've done a little bit of compression, just standard kind of drum bus compression, a little bit of overdrive, which is doing some saturation, and then just a limiter. So nothing too crazy with that. But the one thing I was doing, I remember I did some parallel compression, and I did this Aphex Vintage Exciter. I was really doing quite a lot here as well, actually, just to brighten this up. And it's quite a nice technique just to throw this on. If I turn this on and off, that's having quite a big effect on this break actually. And then this parallel compression, for me, parallel compression in this instance is doing almost the same as what some of these perk layers are doing, just by giving me more energy and thickening up the sound. If I pull this in and out, It's just adding a little bit more energy, as if you added like another shaker element in there is what I'm really hearing. So that's what I'm using it for there. So all about just bringing the energy up in this break and to make it sound full and busy. And that's the whole idea, I think, with these rolling kind of atmospherical style grooves.